I haven't been on this stage for 25 years, so thank you for coming tonight. We would like to get started in a good fashion, and if you will please stand, I will lead a pledge of allegiance, and then we've asked, well, I'll introduce our prayer. Flag's over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I've asked Alan Walker to open us in prayer, and if you don't know Alan, fascinating individual who has authored multiple books on our canyon and actually grew up in the canyon. So, Alan Walker.
Our Heavenly Father, we have humbly gathered this evening before the capacity of an information gathering session about a place near us that we hold most dear because of our longtime affiliation. We ask those special blessings Thou hast for us this night, Father, to be vested upon our heads and upon our spirits as we contemplate those things that will be told to us. We pray to be taught, that we may make informed decisions concerning these problems that we have in this area. These things we ask, and we do so in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
If we could, I'd like to just identify a few individuals, if I could. I'd like to thank our state auditor, John Dougal, for attending. Thank you. Seated next to him is Rob Shelton from the American Fork City Council. I'm just recognizing at least elected officials. Don Watkins, Mayor of Alpine. Is there anybody else out here who is an elected official of any? Oh, I'm sorry, Bill Lee, our county commissioner. I don't know why. And Brian Green, our representative to this area. Jenny Reese, Cedar Hills City Council. Daniel Zapala from Cedar Hills. Okay. We should have a social, and I get to know my neighbors. Yes. Go ahead. Oh, Mayor Beatty. The lights are in my face. I would have known that one. So, any others? Okay, right here.
I'm Paige Albrecht. I'm on the Planning Commission in Lehigh.
Okay, Planning Commission, wonderful. Great, thank you for coming. Any other hands I'm missing? Elected officials? They play a key role in this and have to this point and will continue to play a key role. Any representation of any special groups that are here that you could say I'm a chairman of an outdoor whatever society, a bicycling club or anything like that, the horsemen's groups that are here. Can I? Okay, right over here. Okay, did you hear that? Silver Lake Homeowners Association, thank you for coming. Okay. All right, well, we can all say we're concerned citizens. We have a love for American Fork Canyon, and that's why I'm here as well. Now, could I just say this as a city official in American Fork, we know we don't own this canyon. It has our name on it, and we have special place in our hearts for the canyon, but we understand and know that it's owned by everybody. But we felt like the need to kind of lead out in some respects because of the name that's associated with it. And so, well, we've got a program that's going to be very quick, I think. We won't need you here for 4 hours, but we want to tell a little bit of the story that led us to here, okay? And there's been a lot of information that we think has been pretty good. There's maybe some things that haven't been factual, and so we're hoping to maybe clear some of that up. And so we're going to start with Karen. I'm just going to have all those others that have been asked. I'm going to just come down here and we'll just cue you up here from below.
Thanks, Bud. I have to write my stuff down so I don't forget. Sorry. Welcome. It's humbling to see so many people with different backgrounds and interests come together. The reason we all love American Fork Canyon. My name is Karen McCoy. I grew up in American Fork. I fell in love with the canyon simply by spending time there. In the 1980s, I attended my first public meeting with concerns about the neighbor to the north knocking on our back door. I was a single voice. I was not heard. As the years passed, many of us started to see patterns of no access. In April of this year, I found out about the first AF Canyon Vision meeting. As I pulled into the parking lot, loaded with cars with ski racks, I knew in my heart this was much more than a vision. It shocked me that no one had picked up on the big picture, or was it low-key for a reason. A friend had a reporter from Crossroads Journal reach out May 9th, 53 days ago. He published an article with my concerns, but I didn't know if anyone would be listening.
My name is Mark Allen. About 6 weeks ago, life was peaceful and nice. One day I was working on my computer and I read an article that came across my newsfeed. It was the story that Karen just alluded to. My first thought was, that's pretty sad. I set it aside. About an hour later, I picked it back up and read it again. I thought, that is really too bad. And I set it aside. About an hour later, I thought, what could Mark Allen do to make a difference for a woman I'd never met? I started a Facebook group. Willie.
Well, Mark contacted me, and of course I was pretty surprised. I spent a lot of time up in the canyon as well doing my photography. And I think we're all here because we love the canyon. There's no doubt in our minds that it is the crown jewel. I mean, it is a place that you can get to, you can go to. You just can't see that beauty anywhere else in the Wasatch. And what's unique about it to me, and what really wanted to get me involved, is just the pure sense that we all have different interests in the canyon. And there's no other canyon you can actually go to that you can mountain bike, you can horseback ride, you can ski, you can take your ATVs, you can take your Jeeps. And I thought, well man, if Snowbird's gonna come in and do that, how's that gonna close off our access? What's that gonna be like for us? And my major concern was that it seemed like Utah County didn't have a voice. You know, the people here that actually enjoy the canyon, the general public, the voice wasn't being heard. And so I jumped on the bandwagon right away and put all I could into it. And that's what brought us to this point here.
In 6 weeks, we've grown to 6,130 people. We're growing at about 23% per week. We started our first fundraising event yesterday, and we closed it within 24 hours, having effectively raised $3,600 for a good cause. As Brad's coming up, other members of the group here that have, please stand. We've never met our full team, honestly. Some of them are here.
I'm going to allude to a meeting that took place a few weeks ago at the Fox Hollow Golf Course, and where we met with the representatives from Snowbird, one in particular. And from that meeting, there were many of us, probably all of us, that came away very uncomfortable with the responses that we were hearing. And we were just very pleased that we had one of our county commissioners there, Bill Lee. And he was just the right man that we needed at the time. And he heard this because in the end, we know this will be at the county level. But in an effort to help unify the cities, and especially to, in a way, I guess, to lead out, American Fork City passed a resolution on our last council meeting. And I've asked Councilman Shelton to come up and read that. He was very instrumental in helping us to draft this and to bring the right words in the right places. And I'm going to have him explain that and read it.
Thanks, Brad. I think sometimes an elected official, people ask me what it's like, and I think it'd be awesome to put a GoCam on sometimes and just give people an idea of what it's like. To give you a little bit of perspective, Father's Day for me started out a little bit different. It started at 6:30 in the morning with a phone call with Brad Frost. And we talked all throughout the day on Father's Day on various issues, and it was all various issues dealing with this Canyons issue, seeing what we could be able to do. And so I appreciate Brad's time and commitment on this issue. And that's one of the great things about working with a good council, is where you can be able to divide and conquer, give out different assignments and be able to take different roles. So if you'll bear with me, I'll read this resolution that we had passed. Whereas the City of American Fork has environmental, economic, social, historical interests in American Fork Canyon, and whereas the City of American Fork desires to establish best practices and policies regarding the management and use of such public property, recreational property, and the environment, and whereas the City of American Fork has an obligation as environmental stewards to create thoughtful measures to protect the watershed and the resources and quantities of water and natural resources that support local habitat, residents, and industry, and whereas the City of American Fork desires to reasonably preserve historic sites, historic recreation, respites, and uses, and whereas our residents and others living along the Wasatch Front enjoy recreation in American Fork Canyon and surrounding landscape, and whereas the city desires to create safe, environmentally friendly, and efficient right-of-ways for recreational and travel, and whereas there are economic forces that will attempt to utilize public lands or privatize public lands for economic gain to the detriment of lifestyle, we stand with courage and hold our county and other elected officials accountable for discharge and protections of the resources which have value that supersede pure economics. Whereas we support historic Utah County Commission ordinances, statutes, staff recommendations that have protected American Fork Canyon by reasonably limiting access by commercial entities who have other access points, namely from Salt Lake County. Whereas all those who have gone before us would expect us to rise up and balance measures to protect our borders, those who will follow will benefit from environmental protections. We, the citizens of American Fork, demand for our namesake canyon for decades to come, for it is from whence life springs forth, from which clear waters flow, for our crops and sustainment of our families, and from which many early settlers gave their very lives as they toiled in the canyons to provide for their families. And this legacy must be preserved, the lands protected with thoughtful and reasonable measures. Whereas these God-given resources are dear to us and vital for our community, we therefore ask our county commissioners to stand alongside us and use reasonable tools, including legal actions and/or injunctions, to protect our lands. We call upon our county commissioners to engage with public meetings beginning on July 1st, 2015, to be held at American Fork, to begin critical discussions regarding our public lands. We call upon the Forest Service, Mountain Land Association of Governments, and other trusted groups to join us in this democratic process. Whereas, thanks. Only a couple more pages, guys, bear with me. I think this was an attorney that drafted this. Whereas it is vital to the protections of our canyon resources, therefore we call upon Mayor Ben McAdams of Mountain Accord to assist in the protection of our borders, to withdraw acreage in Utah County from the Mountain Accord process until the time that Utah County citizens and civic leaders have been fully engaged in the democratic process in our county. We ask Mayor McAdams to respond in writing or public statement by no later than July 4th, 2015. Whereas we are fighting for independence from the processes in Salt Lake, Wasatch, and Summit counties that seem at present to potentially compromise our natural resources. We look forward to continuation of healthy relationships with those in Mountain Accord, but we need to stand on our own merit to protect that which is of vital importance to our economy and way of life. Whereas it is a season to take courage for our obligations to our Creator as environmental stewards for these land and resources He has given us, we have an obligation and a duty to all within its scope of our abilities to take thoughtful and balanced measures to protect this crown jewel, our namesake American Fork Canyon. Now therefore, the City of American Fork has therefore developed an environmental stewardship of American Fork Canyon policy. The City of American Fork is committed to creating policies and best practices that preserve natural resources in the watershed in American Fork Canyon while allowing public access for recreation by establishing and utilizing practices for watershed protections with other cities in our area. 2, promoting and fostering economic awareness and stewardship opportunities for citizens to help the Forest Service in maintaining and protecting resources. 3, fostering outreach education efforts in American Fork schools to encourage land preservation, environmental responsibility, and civic consciousness. 4, fostering awareness among residents, businesses, and business partners through public education and partnership as to the economic value that wilderness areas provide as to the economic value of AF Canyon. Number 5, working to protect lands that are gateways to the canyon that bears the city's name. 6, supportive of public meetings and building relationships with Mountain Land Association of Governments, Forest Service, and other interested groups with our first meeting on July 1st, 2015. Promoting discussions of options that may include watershed protections, procurement of water for future development, land acquisitions, for conservation easements, and fostering the public discourse regarding the uses in the EC1 and EC2 zones, and possible tax ramifications for citizens and local governments. Pursuing measures, resolutions, and meetings that encourage the cooperation of civic leaders in cities, including possible legal actions, where necessary to secure our city and other county borders from forces that may diminish the quality of life for our citizens. And number 9, ensuring that the canyon will continue to be an asset for the public and not overrun by commercial interests that would reduce access for those who enjoy this pristine and remarkable place. Be it therefore resolved that the City Council of American Fork, Utah adopts the environmental stewardship of American Fork Canyon policy stated above, passed and approved by the City Council of American Fork, Utah on this, the 23rd day of June, 2015, signed Mayor Hadfield. Just to add a few comments. One of the reasons I personally, as a council member, could be able to vote for this is I think that there's no other pure basis for American patriotism than that of representation. That is truly what our country was founded upon. And I think that is what we are looking for and striving for, is representation in this process to be more transparent. I've been appreciative of those that have come out to be able to get more information, and I'm as anxious as anyone to get as much information we can to start having those public meetings. So thanks for Brad and everyone else who's been involved in getting this started.
And speaking of information, we're going to turn some time over to Sean Sager with Mountain Land Associated Governments to make a quick presentation to us. We want you to know there's going to be time for questions as well.
Thank you so much. Do you have that graphic, Scott, that you can show? So, my name is Sean Sager with Mountain Land Association of Governments, and I work for the mayors and county commissioners in Utah County, Wasatch County, and Summit County. And meet with these folks about once a month or twice a month, and we conduct a variety of regional transportation planning programs in Wasatch County and Utah County. We also do deliver Meals on Wheels for senior citizens. We also distribute community development block grants and some of those type of social service programs. This particular money that came to our organization through the legislature, $100,000, was directed to Mountain Land through Utah Department of Transportation. And they asked MAG to be the project manager. And I was the fortunate victim of that assignment, or a successor of that assignment. So we started a visioning effort in April or March of this year, pretty early in this year, late last year, we started doing some survey work. So I'm going to give you a brief timeline of how that project developed in concert with the Mountain Accord project. They're two separate projects. They have two different funding sources. associated with them. And I'm going to real briefly take you through the red bars and the blue bars. Red is Salt Lake for the Utes. Blue is blue for the Cougars. That's how we thought about that. So MA is Mountain Accord. So you see that Mountain Accord is the red bars and the red stars. And so the Mountain Accord systems groups, they were working all last year and into this spring on developing their idealized systems, what they thought would be good ideas for the Mountain Accord, which was everything in Salt Lake, Wasatch, and Summit counties. They really didn't do anything in Utah County until about February, March or February of this year, and I'll show you where that occurs. The AFC Vision RFP, the blue star right below that red bar, that's when we issued the request for proposals. We immediately hired Logan Simpson Design at that point. Buck Swaney is the project manager that we hired. And then we started to do some of our intercept surveys. The intercept survey is a contract that we signed with Utah State University. It is a survey that a guy will actually come up to a visitor in American Fork Canyon, ask them a series of questions. What are you doing here? How did you get here? What do you want to do during your trip? And it's consistent with the National Recreation Survey. So we can compare this data with all the data that was collected in the Mountain Accord effort, along with any of the data that exists in all the national forest. So it has high value because of that consistency. The blue bar indicates that when that was delayed and when we actually started collections in about February or so. The delay was due to some budget constraints. We had $100,000 from the legislature. We allocated $80,000 to Logan Simpson. The Utah State University survey was about $58,000 is what the cost was on it. We were short money. We requested that our steering committee consider donating to the project. Snowbird donated $50,000 at that point in time, right around September, October of 14. You can see Mountain Accord Retreat, the red star. Thank you, Scott. That's showing that the Mountain Accord went into an executive board retreat, and they convened the Cottonwood Canyons Task Force, the CCTF. That task force was the one that developed some of the land trade concepts. At that point, before any of this, none of the land trade concepts were even envisioned by any of the public, at least. Maybe some private individuals had those ideas. I do understand that some of those land trades were considered as part of the Matheson Land Act in previous years. You can see that green star. It's called the Mountain Accord Blueprint, public involvement period. At that point is when those land trades became public, right around March of this year. And the American Fork Canyon visioning analysis begins about that same point in time. We hold our first public open house that Karen mentioned in April, mid-April. And at that meeting, we showed a map that shows the land transfer proposals that would occur as that became news to us. And so that was presented at that meeting. And then, of course, around April of this year, May is when we started to get a lot of confusion taking place between Mountain Accord and American Fork Vision. And the public's confusion between what the American Fork Canyon project was about versus what Mountain Accord was all about. Last Monday, our steering committee met and they took 3 different actions. They decided to refund the $50,000 to Snowbird because the donation was too large. I told the steering committee that I take responsibility for not calling their attention to the size of the donation. I think if it would have been more proportionate to $5,000 or $10,000, it wouldn't have been such a problem in the public's perception that Snowbird owned that piece of work. So I tried to convince or convey that I should have been in tune with that more. The second action that we took was to continue the intercept survey collection. So we're continuing that Utah State University survey collection through January of 16. That'll be really good data for anyone to use, including the Forest Service. The third thing we decided to do was to pause the planning work. until the Mountain Accord land transfer proposal has been dealt with. Because no one wants to talk about bike lanes or going up the canyon on horses or whatever it might be, because the land transfer is everything that people are focused on. So the steering committee recommended that we pause the planning work as well. Pausing that planning work actually allows us to take the remaining budget that's left over in that planning contract and put that back to Snowbird. So financially it worked out very conveniently, timing-wise. That's all I really have. Mark asked me to give a broad overview of where that came from, and Commissioner Lee, so if I can answer any questions or whatever you want to do, appreciate it.
We're going to ask Commissioner Lee to come up now and kind of tell you, this has been an evolving thing with our friends from Salt Lake County on a day-to-day basis, and I think he's got some news that he could share that he's just learned today as well.
Thank you for being here. Well, those lights are really bright. Hopefully they're not reflected back. You know, I have found that history at times turns on the smallest of hinges. And to see individuals step forward in our communities and say, wait a second, there's something that needs to be done, is always very impressive to me. I received a few reports and had some meetings early on, I don't know, early on, maybe a month or two ago, talking about American Fork and the lands that were up there. But frankly, I was quite busy. I was busy with another issue that was pressing on my mind with that Provo-Orem BRT project, so that was a little bit pressing for me at the time. But I had this when I saw the proposals, and then I also saw some of the conflict that was possibly arising there. I told my assistant, we have got to put this in a bucket that we come back to. And I received an email, an invitation to come to a meeting at Fox Hollow. And at that time I thought, well, I don't even have any idea what this is about. I could see that it was about Snowbird and that the president there was coming down. But as I was driving home, tired from the day, I thought, I wonder if I should go to that or not. And I thought, well, I better. So I went over to it. I was shocked at what I saw in a group of people talking about an issue that frankly I knew very little about. So this was about a couple weeks ago. I can't remember when was that, Brad? A couple weeks? 2 weeks ago? I was shocked on a couple different levels. First level, that we're talking about land in Utah County, and as a representative, not very long, since only from the first of the year, I knew hardly anything about it. That was shocking to me. Second, the resistance that I found and felt afterwards when I asked, how come we're not having representation on this? Where is our representation in the Mountain Accord? And the kind of little bit of the pushback that was given. So I went back after that meeting, and I went to that meeting and spoke at that just briefly. I wasn't going to, I was just going to go sit and listen. There was two things that I came away with. Utah County needs time and information to digest what's going on. I called some of the elected officials in Salt Lake County that I knew, and I asked them, I said, what are you doing? According to your charter, or at least from what people are saying from your charter, you're going to stay in the 3 counties. How come you've jumped the fence? What's up with that? And they said, well, it kind of fits into our model. And so I asked them as an elected official to another elected official, if the shoe was on the other foot, what would you do? And they said, well, I would probably throw a fit. And I said, well, expect a fit to probably be thrown. Because I think as a representative of the people in Utah County, if we don't have an opportunity to run through the process or the processes that we're looking for, we're not representing the people in Utah County appropriately. So with that came, it was like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. All kinds of stuff happened. You know, it just seemed to explode on every level. And I'd get elected officials saying, what's going on? Are you getting the same thing I'm getting? you know, what's happening here, and you know, the group's running on emotion and passion, and you hear it all the time. Oh, there's tons of misinformation out there, and you know what? I don't fault that, because when you start a process and it seems like your back's against the wall, you're going to run pretty fast and you're going to try the best you can to get the information. And I mentioned over and over, give them the information. Just give them the information so that they can move forward. My position has always been on this is through the process. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or ugly what they're trying to do, but until we as citizens and as elected officials go through this process, we will never have an opportunity to know if it's good, bad, or ugly. Unless we have the information to actually look at it, you know, internalize it and see how it's going to affect us, it's always the scary thing that happened on the other side of the mountain. And so that has and always been my push as I worked down through it. I asked, as I knew as a county commissioner, that I could put a work session item on. I put a work session item on and then invited everyone to come. And hundreds of you showed up, at least. Some of you are here. And it was fun to see involvement again from individuals who started and said, wait a second, something's not right. Let's see where we can go. And then just being a little part of it myself. So we put that on there. We had a lot of dialogue. That spawned other activities going around. We had more and more dialogue back and forth. I saw the softening of a hardened position of this is the way it's going to go, and at this point in time, you're just going to have to jump into the next phase. I knew what the next phase was, and I said that is basically saying to me as a Utah County elected official, we don't care about how you represent the people in Utah County, and so we need to have our first phase before we can allow it to go to the second phase. So I saw that starting to soften, and as it softened here and there, you know, it's not an easy soften. I mean, it takes time to go back and forth. But I've had conversation with them. I actually went up to Mountain Accord and presented to them and talked about some of the concerns that we have, mainly on representation, no representation in theirs, and no influence or input into the process here on Utah County. And came away from there, and they had a motion basically saying that they are going to back off from the Utah County side until we go through our process. In the process, and to think that it's over is not the case. There's a lot to do. Hopefully, the work forward will be collaborative. There's some hiccups that we're going to have to definitely work through. We do have a resolution that we're hoping to pass that has some strong language in it. At least I'm hoping it'll pass. I had it crafted from our attorneys for this next Tuesday meeting to just kind of make sure and cement where we are at as a county, just like the one you read from American Fork here, and to put that on there so that we know exactly where we're at, and in writing, we have that in writing. And then as 3 county commissioners, I was hoping today that we had a chance to meet, but it didn't quite work out. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about a task force and stakeholders and groups that can come together, and we can start the process of looking at what we can do, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. When we look at water, we look at land transfers that are up there, all the issues that are being affected by this. So I would encourage you to stay involved in the process as much as possible, because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and there's a lot of voices that still need to be heard and educated. We have to go through gathering the information still and getting us up to speed. I don't feel fully up to speed. I don't. We have to continue to gather that information. Then we're going to have to get the information out and get educated and eventually come to a conclusion, a Utah County conclusion on what to do specifically with that piece in negotiation with Sunbird up there. So that's kind of what I wanted to mention tonight, and hopefully we'll stay in tune and a part of the process as we go forward. So thank you, and thank you for being here.
questions here. So we have some cities represented here tonight. How important is it to you that they pass resolutions in support of what we're doing here? Does that make you feel supported as a county commissioner?
Yes, I could have put that resolution on yesterday's agenda, but I thought I'd hold off just a little bit to give the cities an opportunity to hopefully go through some of this. And I'm feeling that the cities are looking for the county to move first before they move in some respects. And so it would mean a great deal to see that kind of support, even if it's just as simple as we believe the process needs to go forward in Utah County. If that's the simple resolution, if we can have that throughout this county as well from our cities and our elected officials there, that would be very supportive.
All right, I'm going to, yes, that's right. I thought, let's have some questions. Again, we want to give our commissioner all the information he needs to go back. We've got some traveling mics.
Hi, Commissioner Lee. Joel Wright, Cedar Hills, former Cedar Hills City Council member. There's been concerns that some people have received large campaign donations or gifts from our friends at Snowbird. Can we make sure that they're not part of the key decision makers or on the key committees?
Thank you, Joel. Did you want me to respond to that or just be aware of that? I have not taken any. I know there's concern with that because of how it's perceived. I'd love to talk to you about the nuances of it. I don't want to get into too much of that, but it's out there. I think that information being out there is important for us to have so that you know. So it's an open and transparent process. Realize one thing too. I am one commissioner. I'm one, so I'm not. There's three, so I'm just one.
Commissioner Lee, hi. I'm Daniel Zapala from the Cedar Hills City Council. You mentioned that the resolution was brought up in Mountain Court. You kind of implied that it was passed. I wanted to verify that resolution was passed today.
Yes, there was a motion on that resolution, and it was passed.
Great. Then you mentioned that the resolution was that they would wait until the Utah County process moved forward. So I wonder if you can say something about what that process will look like. What will the scope of that process be, and who will be involved?
I don't have all the answers to that because we haven't had a chance to actually meet as county commissioners and go through that. Right now where it sits is with the 3 county commissioners. We're going to have to sit down and decide. We have had tons of suggestions. Let's just put it that way. Everyone says, do it. Well, what about this? What about that? What about that? And I think people have been caught up in it probably a little bit unfairly, and putting the crossfires back and forth. And so until us 3 county commissioners sit down and talk about that, and I would love to hear your suggestions on what you think that process should be. Is it a working group? Do we have a working group with stakeholders? Do we hear from all the different groups? I think it needs to be a whole process personally. I think it needs to be as open as possible, but eventually some point in time realizing that if we think we're going to get 100% of the people on the same page, that's not going to happen. We're going to have to reach a certain level of understanding and hopefully come to a point where we say, this is probably the best proposal we have. And Mountain Accord has assured me that they will accept that proposal, whatever it is. And I don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but whatever that proposal is that comes out of Utah County, they said they will accept that proposal.
So is there a deadline? I know it's really early in the process, but has Mountain Accord put a deadline on our process in Utah County? And so is there a freeze on the 416 acres from Utah County that was going to be swapped?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think you're gathering that from because a lot of people were saying, especially on the Mountain Accord side, they feel a time crunch. And so because of that, there was some suggestions. There was some suggestions of 90 days as one of them that were thrown out there. I think we've diffused that to a certain extent now because we mentioned to them, again, the two things that we need to have on the Utah County side is time, not time in this is the only time we're going to give you, but the time we need, and also information. So at this point in time, there is no restraints on the time frame, until it basically is until we go through the process and come to a conclusion.
On the Mountain Accord website, it said that they're giving Utah County seats at the table, allowing us to have input, and at the very end of that, it says they're allowing this process for Utah County until July 21st.
Yeah, I know. That, there has been some press releases and so forth that were out there, and I can probably safely say that we have gone past some of those press releases and had more conversations on them.
That was yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I had conversations last night with their director and others, and just reaffirming where we're at. And I think that's, and the Mountain Accord, you know, they really want this process to go quickly. I get what they need, but again, I think we're effectively at a position now in which they understand and we understand that there is a separation in that, and that because and frankly they offered, how about if we seed some money to help with public meetings and so forth, and it was like, thank you, but why don't we just let it be Utah County? And so that was another thing that came across, and they said, well, how about if, and they suggested things. They suggested, why don't we help you pick the task force, or why don't we have why don't we get applications? We'll accept the applications. Why don't we have the governor's office do it? And I truly think that they were trying to find a way to help, but I think because of all that's happened, it was more of, hold on, let's just let us go through the process. And I think that's where that understanding was finally starting to come last night. And I think, Sean, would you feel the same way with that? So I think that, because we've had conversations, you know, back and forth. Sean's name was attached to one of them, and we kind of had to work through some of that too.
In that press release, they mentioned that they've gone through a 3 to 7 year process to get to where they are today.
Sure.
And they just want to finish that. They just want to sign the proposal and be done.
Right.
But I don't know why they wouldn't let Utah County have a 3 to 7 year process. I know they don't want us to take that long, but that's how long they took.
Right.
They said they want to give us 3 months.
And believe me, I hope it is not a 3 to 7 year process, because I think that's way. You have to realize that their process is they're looking at all kinds of information, from watershed to transportation, you know, to land exchange, and land exchanges is one of the modules. And so when we look at this one for us in Utah County, we're only going to focus on that one task force. And so it's not the comprehensive thing that they've been fighting about this for forever.
So sorry, I have one more question. I feel like it's like if I went up to Mayor Ben McAdams and went into his garage and took his brand new car and took it to a dealership and traded it for a car that I really want and I felt like I needed, and I've been shopping for a really long time for this car and I really want it, and so I'm going to go to the dealership and just trade his car for what I want. That's what they're doing with our American Fork Canyon land. They're trading our car for what they want. And I just think that the best thing we can do is get that land back on our side and just get it completely out of the Mountain Accord process.
Okay, it's out of the process. Now we'll go through ours.
Commissioner, hi, my name is Jackie Sarah. I'm with the Utah Shared Access Alliance, or USAL,
Yeah.
and also a proud member of the Dirt Heads Off-Road Club. My question to you is, do you know where Snowbird is in the actual process of the land swap? In other words, have they already submitted that proposal to the federal government, or are they still working out the details?
From my understanding, no. And the reason why is Snowbird could have applied for a land swap all along on their own at any point in time. And they've been looking at this process for some time, so you probably would ask yourself, why then haven't they done it? And this is my opinion and my conclusion with it, but the reason why they probably haven't done that is because they wanted to go through a process and probably work with groups that they were associated with, and not just do it on their own, because they can, and they still can. They could apply. Now, realize that, and most people, I don't think, in knowing the understanding of the processes and the phases, and I realize we're at all different levels of understanding, myself included, but when you make a proposal like that to the Forest Service, then they have to go through either an EIS or an EA, and then also go through the NEPA process. And so when you're going through those processes, by federal statute, you have to coordinate with the local jurisdiction or those that are in charge. In this case, it's county commissioners. They have to deal with county commissioners. So if you're a business entity and you're trying to swap some land and you feel any hesitation or resistance that direction, it would not be in your favor to go forward until you found some sort of consensus. I think that's what they're trying to find, is some consensus. So would you agree with that too, Sean? Okay.
I have one more question for you.
Sure.
Going up Mineral Basin a couple weeks ago, we noticed a bunch of trespassing signs that Snowbird has placed up the trail. Do they own that land, or is that part of
they own some big chunks of land. I wish I could tell you exact. You can probably see on some of the maps they have up here, but they do own land, and I think we need to be sensitive to private property rights too. I mean, private property rights is something that we hold dear in this country as well. And so we need to look at that as well and see how that's going to play into the factors as well. But they do own some big chunks of land up there.
Hello, sir. My name is Eileen Miller, and
okay.
I'm sorry. And so I was at the meeting that you attended when you admitted that you were a county commissioner, and it was the first you were hearing of it.
I admitted it, huh?
And yeah, we heard that. I was there. But I just wanted to clarify something. We're dealing with the federal government here. And we've kind of got the notices backwards. Normally, you would have the grassroots involved in the beginning, and then get the response from people from the onset. But the way it appears that's happened is that Snowbird cutting their private deals with the federal government, and then they included the counties that they thought would be applicable. And by their own admission last meeting, they said American Fork Canyon is the crown jewel. And so it looks to me like what has happened is, because of the way the law is written, they have to give public notice to people before things take place. And they were just hoping they could kind of slip this thing under after they'd done all their hard work for years and years and years. And that I caught him on the term he was using, which was all of the stakeholders. I reminded him that every single person in that meeting that was a federal taxpayer was a stakeholder, because we are the federal government. And and it just appears that this whole process, instead of going grassroots first, and getting the input to begin with from the county commissioners, from the people that live in the area, they've kind of done all the backward deals and got it all set into motion, and that this is just the end of the requirement and they're calming the natives by having these meetings, so that, you know, if the fix is in already, that they fulfilled the requirement under the law.
Yeah, there are some concerns, and I think that's the reason why when we see individuals jump up and say, let's do something about it, you're fully within your right to be able to address and petition the government like you're mentioning, and saying, hang on, hold on a second, who is the true sovereign here in this country? And I think that's totally appropriate to do. Yes, sir.
So apparently, we've already got a building going up on the Utah County side, but it's right up at the top, right? Hidden Peak?
A building going up?
They're putting in some lifts or something to that effect at the top. Of
I don't know. I'd have to research that. I don't know.
So the question I have, and I'd like to find out over the process, is if they are making money off of Utah County lands, which they are by putting in buildings and structures on that, whether it's for lifts or otherwise, we should be getting a share of the tax revenues off of that.
It's property tax.
Well, isn't there taxes associated with the lift passes and other things like that, the services they're providing up there? And shouldn't we get a portion of that?
Yeah, and that would be a great question for our auditor over here. But nevertheless,
so that's what I'd like to find out over the process is because they've already started doing things on Utah County side, what's our share of the tax revenues? If this gets to the point where they open the whole lift up, what's our share of the revenues? Because I don't think that we should just be giving up this pristine wilderness for the purposes of nothing, that we get nothing out of it. And Salt Lake County gets all the revenues off of it.
So to kind of address that in one way, the county in the past, actually with Snowbird, has asked them to keep a lot of their stuff on the other side, except, on the other side of the mountain, their lift passes and so forth in which they generate. And also there was an agreement for them to be able to service it from the other side as well, so that we don't have to send up our fire and our police and all that kind of stuff if things happen up in that area, search and rescue. Those things were put into place knowing that they had already come over onto this side, our side of the mountain. On the tax revenue side, usually they're generated at the place where they're generated. So when we do sales tax, for instance, if we have a business that's located in the county, then the sales tax generated in county out of unincorporated areas, then that sales tax, wherever it's generated, that's where it starts from. And if it's within the city, the sales tax within the city. So if the ticket booth is on the other side of the mountain in Salt Lake County, that's where the sales tax or the taxes generate, typically.
So that's basically like saying all I have to do is sell tickets in Salt Lake County and we get no revenue off of Sundance. That's not right. We need to readdress that and say, no, you're using Utah County lands to generate revenue. So because of that, we want a portion of it based on how much land you're using, and you can even base it off of how many people are using those lifts. But if you're going to use Utah County lands to generate revenue, it shouldn't matter where your ticket booth is sold. Because that just means we're getting none of the benefits and we're getting all of the costs. Now, yes, you've said we've got agreements that we don't have to service fire and rescue and stuff like that. But if we're already going to have the eyesores that ski resorts are up in a pristine part of the wilderness, then at least we need to get some of the revenues off what's generated because they opened Utah County roads.
I know, but it is such an impossible task to do that. If that was the case, where we were to do things like that, then everyone would have their home base or do their generation in areas where there's no sales tax, attached, and then they just say they're doing business within our counties or within our state. So it would be a great question for Mr. Dougal if you wanted to kind of research that further with him.
Tim Hagler. I have a question. It's more centered around what was mentioned back here, and in my opinion, it is probably more concerning. It seems like in the meeting we're having right now, we're discussing a posture, which is more, let's slow down and take a look at what options there are and plans there are so that we can respond appropriately, and that's definitely an intelligent thing to do. But at the same time, the question of the land transaction that occurred in 2014, along with the water rights, could be suspect. And that might actually be our only hold to stop the process. It is usually the case that the federal government will move forward after certain steps are made, unless, of course, process or procedure are in question. I think that we should probably be a little bit more strong on the questions of process and procedure if we have any hope of stopping this process, honestly. Do you feel that way?
I'm not quite sure where you're driving. Are you trying to say that what they were doing in the land transfer was illegal?
I'm suggesting that they didn't go through proper process and notification. and that all parties that were centered at communicating with the public didn't do the proper process. And for that reason, I think we have an argument, if not a case, to bring back and say not only should you not be in our canyon, but you need to get back those water rights.
Now, I don't know anything about the water rights, but I think we've successfully said what you said on the first part, and that it needs to come through the correct process and back onto the Utah County side of the process that we have. The water rights, I'm not sure of. I've heard some rumblings of that. I don't know anything else on what has been purchased or what has been done with the water.
Sad thing is neither do we.
Yeah.
We see, we can go online, and I don't know how many other people have, but you can see that the transaction took place, and Mountain West Title provided the transaction of it, but you don't know of the negotiations, the representations. I know that we have Mountain Land Association of Governments here, and I know that they were part of that transaction. Weren't you part of that transaction?
I wouldn't think so.
So maybe we have some information that needs to be cleared up.
We do.
Was.
We do. Granted. That's one of the things that we need to look at.
Hi, I'm concerned or confused about the federal forest part in this. The reason being is the cabins above Tibble Fork. When you used to be able to buy those originally, the federal forest gave them a 99-year lease. In the last 10 years, the Federal Forest Service came back to those cabin owners and said, oh, forget about it, you have a 4-year lease now that you have to renew every 4 years. So, the Federal Forest Service has a vote in this. Why would the Federal Forest Service, under any circumstance, vote yes when cabins are going to be up there? Doesn't make any sense to me. The Federal Forest Service right now has a class action lawsuit with cabin owners all over the country. Cabin owners are trying to get more rights back from the Federal Forest Service to get longer leases. So if they vote yes, then cabins are going to be up in forest again when the Federal Forest Service is taking away cabin owner rights all over the country right now. So it doesn't make any sense why they would vote yes under any circumstance to me. Can you explain that?
Okay, I'll try. Because, I mean, you touched on a whole bunch of different issues there. One, when you're talking about federal land, and when I worked for Senator Mike Lee for 3 years, and we did talk about this on an extensive basis around the country. And some of the stuff you said, I saw firsthand in the way of some of the properties being evaluated a lot higher for the future too, to the point to where they're going to have to move because they just couldn't afford it anymore. But the Forest Service, we're talking two issues. One, Forest Service, which is public land, and there's quite a few things up there that are under a lease. Mutual Dale's one of them. You know, it's a leased property that the Forest Service is allowing that Mutual Dale to be able to be in existence, and some of the cabins as well. They have leases out for periods of time. So there's that issue that's there. The second issue is that of private property, because Snowbird owns property up there that is private property, so the Forest Service doesn't have a say on what happens on the private property side. And so that's the issue in which I think we're kind of mixing them back and forth. The Forest Service, when they're looking at these land swaps, they wanted to exchange 416 acres on Utah County side, which is public forest land, for the equivalent of 1,100 and something acres that is on the other side of the mountain. And so when they're looking at that land swap, they're going to have to evaluate it and go through their processes. And one of their processes is value, because they can't wind up negative. They have to wind up whole. And so they're going to look at that value and determine it back and forth. And so those are the two processes, you know, that we have with the private property and the owners there, and then the swap. And so they're going to look at it and say, this is in the advantage of the Forest Service to go ahead and swap land. And they're not taking a position on this. The Forest Service isn't. They're just looking at how we come out benefit for the public. Yes, sir. Yeah, because the forest. Yeah, and that's the issue, sir. I think that's coming down to the basis of what we're saying here is that although the Forest Service crosses boundaries that we have politically, you know, in the way of county lines, they have both sides of the county lines. All we're saying is that when you cross that line and come into Utah County, let's run it through a Utah County process. On Forest Service land? Yeah, the only way they can do that on Forest Service land is to go through conditional use permits and so forth, the permitting process. They would have to go through a public process to do that. You know, on their own land, there's, then if it's yeah, snowbird lands, so it's private land. The private land, they have private property rights like we do, and they would have to go through the process that we have in the county in going with building permits and being properly zoned, and all those things have to take place. Correct. That's a tricky question to a certain degree because it depends on the zone. If it's zoned, right now it's zoned for CE1, so CE1 has a designation of what you can use under a zoning process. And it has requirements that you have to follow to do anything there. And so if they fall within the requirements for a CE1 zone, then they're able to do what they can do, or what they can do underneath that zoning. I don't think so, but he was up there last night. So that's a zoning, yes.
Okay, so I have a comment and then a question. So first off, we've heard encouraging things from both you and the Mountain Land representative about the issue of donations to public officials and to public organizations, and you know what from Snowbird and what do we do about that. And it's nice to hear those encouraging things, but I heard in both instances that kind of because of how it's perceived by the public. And I think that it's important for us to say that we're not concerned about those things because of a PR issue. We're concerned about those things because of questions of improper influence and basic principles of ethical government. The question that I have is, we heard AF City's resolution, which I think is excellent, just a bit ago. And it talked about, in the resolution, the value of pristine lands, and I think that that's important for us to have as part of the process, recognizing that value in the resolutions. Is that part of the resolution that is before the county commission?
In pristine, in
the value of pristine and wild lands. Is the language discussing that value?
I think
I've only heard stuff about we need to go through the process.
It's a process.
It's also that it's not only going through proper processes, but giving the proper value to things that we as people here in Utah Valley value.
Yeah. I think those are great questions, and I'd like to address the one with the campaign stuff. If any of you supported a candidate, and let's say city council or mayor or anything of that nature, and you're to give them any amount of money, and then all of a sudden you had a zoning issue that directly affected you, where is the line between freedom of expression in the way of being able to support a candidate, and then where does that line cross into improper use? I think okay. And thank you, because that's where I'm driving. That's where I'm driving on it. If a contribution has been given, I don't think that you would agree that it's all right to give a contribution. But the line comes in on probably a disclosure. So you can say a disclosure and say, you know what, this process is going to be affected by this, you know, and I received some contributions, campaign contributions on this issue. Therefore, I want the public to know that I have received this, although I don't necessarily think that it was given in intent for something to happen, but nevertheless, I did receive, I think it's an informational thing. We don't like things hidden underneath the covers. They recruit, yeah, they do, and they can, and that's totally, if an elected official feels that way to an extent where they're like, you know what, they gave me this campaign contribution, and by that, therefore, I feel like I need to be not a part of this process, that's totally appropriate. But the disclosure probably needs to come first on that. It is required if there is some sort of financial gain to it, or there's something that can be used, you know, could be used against them, or something of that nature. And I think, and John, please jump in because he's the auditor. But nevertheless, I think that if I was to receive some campaign donations, and let's say I received $1 from every single one of you, and then all of a sudden one of you came up for a zoning change, and I could say, well, you know, I did receive a financial gain, but it's not necessarily going to affect how I view it. I'm going to view it based on the information and the criteria. I don't think that's inappropriate.
So part of the answer is it depends on the situation. So a city councilman, by law, has the option to recuse him or herself for a conflict. A state legislator cannot recuse themselves from a vote. They have to disclose what the conflict is, but they're required to vote. They cannot recuse themselves from a vote. And so it depends on the position and what state law allows. But one of the key things is you're still supposed to disclose whatever conflict you have so the public is aware of that conflict before that action takes place. Sometimes that disclosure takes place in a written form. For example, for the legislature, at the start of the session, they disclose that conflict. Sometimes for a city councilman or a city councilwoman, it may take place in that discussion prior to the vote where they disclose that they may have a conflict on that specific issue. So it kind of depends on the situation. If I could touch one thing on the tax issue, I think what the commissioner said in regards to sales tax is correct. He did not bring up property tax. And so property tax, it depends where the property is located when it comes to business personal property tax. So Snowbird, if they had personal property on this side in the county, would get levied that property tax in the county over here versus the property that's over there in Salt Lake County. Well, I'm just disclosing tax laws as it currently is. And so they would be assessed over here based on the tax rates for the jurisdictions that they are in over here versus they get taxed at the rates for the jurisdictions over there.
Commissioner, my name is Ty Hopkins. I'm from American Fork. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. And really, I mean, we've come quite a ways in the last couple weeks, so yes, thanks for what you've done so far. With that said, my question has to do with the authority, I guess, of the Mountain Accord. I don't understand exactly under what authority the Mountain Accord operates, and the reason I bring that up is because, let's say we go through this entire process, however long it takes on the Utah County side, and I have full confidence that we'll do so properly. Let's say we take a recommendation back that we not swap those lands. Do they have the authority to supersede whatever we tell them?
Yeah, that's a good question. The Mountain Accord has no legal authority. The only authority they have is to propose and to say, here's a plan, here's an option. So they do not have any legal authority to say, this is how it will be done. They just don't. They recognize that. They know that. And so what they've tried to do, and I mentioned this to them when I was up there, is that they've been trying for years, because you heard it, it started, I was there when they started some of these first processes for the senator, when they were talking about ski links and everything else that was going on. They're trying to find a process here. And the reason why they call it an accord is because they're trying to hit, in musical terms, they're trying to hit a chord that actually sounds and works together, because they've got a lot of competing interests up there. And so they tried to bring stakeholders together, stakeholders being those who had interest. And and as far as I understood, it was pretty open. It was open to who has interest. They asked, who has interest up here? And so, of course, Snowbird and Alta and Brighton and Solitude, they all jumped on. They said, we have interest. Then you have Carl Fisher and his group up there, they have interest. You have elected officials. So they were trying to find matches and say, what can we do? What should we do? And maybe those are the wrong terms, not what can we or should we do, but how can we come together to put a proposal together that a majority of us, or a good portion of us, will be able to put a proposal forward that will make sense for all interested bodies. That's the intent of what they were trying to accomplish. But they do not have legal authority. All they can do is propose it to the Forest Service. The Forest Service then takes it and they run it through their processes, and eventually they're going to have to take it and get legislation. So our federal delegation, somebody's going to have to pick it up and carry the water of it back in DC and run a bill on it, and then get some sort of conclusion with it.
So the land swap cannot happen until the last step is that?
Oh yes. And there has to be. It can be done administratively with the Forest Service, but more than likely they're going to want to run it through Congress. And so Congress is going to have to go through that process and say, okay, let's see what we have, what's the land swap, how we're going to deal with it, has it gone through its proper EIS process, has it gone through the NEPA process, has it done all the studies, has it had the public input, has it been vetted all the way through, and then they look at it, they debate it back there, they probably tie it to some other bills that are going through Congress. More than likely it wouldn't be a standalone. I'd be surprised if it was a standalone bill. And then they run it through, and then it gets to the House, the Senate, and the President, and then it becomes a land swap.
And in that process, are there legal recourses, to halt the process to go?
Oh yes, there's lots of there's plenty along the way. It is not once it reaches that process it just sails through. Publics often shot things down. There's legal recourses that go on. You can have county commissioners that oppose it, and that's the difference usually between an EA process or an ES and an EIS is the process of how long and what kind of public input is going to be put into it as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Ken Cromar, former city councilman from Cedar Hills. I had the great pleasure of meeting you Monday for the first time, and I watched you in action there and watch you in action tonight, and I'm very proud that you're my county commissioner. I'm very grateful. I also want to give Mark Allen a shout out, because he has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to try to get people informed and has done an awful lot of work. I'm grateful for his efforts too, and all the others that have done. I wanted to just echo what Joel Wright, former councilman from Cedar Hills, also had to say with regards to those that are taking any sort of consideration that's been given. As you'll recall, at the meeting on Monday, I asked the question, who here that's sitting at this table has received any sort of consideration? It had already been established that Commissioner Ellertson had received $3,500 in a campaign contribution from someone connected to Snowbird directly, I believe is what it was. And no one else came forward to say anything that they'd received any consideration. In part, I'm wondering if you're aware of anybody else that may have received any sort of consideration. I just learned, was it last night or yesterday, on the Preserve American Fork website or Facebook, there was a copy of a letter that was grandma requested that shows that my mayor was in communication with the owners of Snowbird at their behest way back in November of 2013. This is concerning to me. I called 2 council members today and asked them about their knowledge of what our mayor has been doing, and there had been little information provided. And so I think it's a fair question to ask anyone who's on that board who's received any sort of consideration to not be a part and to simply make way for, in our case, a city council person who could go and represent them. We have a website, cedarhillcitizens.org. We've posted that information also. I know I'm going to be asking my council members to vote to have one of them go and represent our city from now on in any sort of a board. And so I'm wondering one other thing, this maybe goes to John Dougal. Are not elected officials, I recall needing to do this, file any sort of a conflict of interest paper on any issue that's a conflict of interest? Is that not correct? It has to be filed with the city in written form saying?
Generally, they're supposed to file stuff in advance. There are many that we find around the state that aren't, and they're just disclosing at the time of a vote. There's some confusion in the law to what extent it's really required in advance. It's definitely required in advance of the vote. There's some confusion where, to what extent it has to be written in advance, and it somewhat depends on jurisdiction. How county commissioners are treated is different than, city council members, is different than legislators. So it's a thing, if you want me to say a blanket statement, there are a lot of elected officials which are not properly disclosing conflicts of interest before they come before their body.
Yeah, I've had occasion to talk to a number of council members over the years, and I'm surprised how few will actually step forward and make those declarations. So anyway, thank you, Commissioner.
Can we also, when we get to small jurisdictions, rural parts of the state, people give the excuse, well, everybody knows what the conflict is, so I don't really have to disclose it because they just know. And that's not really the case.
I understand. That's my hope, that we keep this transparent and make sure that anybody who has been in conflict of interest or has been discovered to be in conflict of interest just quietly bow out and let somebody else that represents the citizens take a seat.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Do you want me to discuss it? I'll stand off this side. Oh, you want to do it right now?
So probably not my words, it's probably more appropriate to let Snowbird tell you in their words. We had at Fox Hollow, Bob Warner, that was a question asked, what are your plans here? I've heard a flip and a flop a few times, but if you'd like to just play that little video, I think it's the one that's called Gondola, the one right up above that. There you go. This will probably help explain it. There's a little bit of animated
If people
stuff.
think it's a good idea, then I think we ought to take a look at it. I think if people go, we hate that, then I don't think we ought to look at it. But I think we ought to put, it's one of many ideas, and I think we ought to consider it.
I'll speak for myself. I hate the idea. One of the challenges there is that you're abutting wilderness land. There's roadless 2 or 3 miles of roadless land at the top. I mean, some of the most beautiful area in the central Wasatch, and you don't have that viewscape problem. I mean, a gondola in there totally changes the character. And I'm a resort skier and backcountry skier. My problem is that once a resort gets a lift access, to the point I heard, you don't see 4-wheel drives, you don't see private user groups frequently going in ski terrain, and especially in the winter. And so that, there's some drainage there that's taken away from backcountry users in basically in a 40-year increment, and whatever extension the resort gets for a special use permit, because that's a lot of public land that potentially is impacted in that. And that's where I think people in the community need to get aware that it could really change the character of the canyon if that were to happen.
Right. And I appreciate your opinion, and I think it's, if it turns out that our community, your community, think that it's a bad idea, then I think we ought to not do it.
Okay, one other question I had was that the zoning went from CE1 to CE2. Are there, mountain land, we've all seen Deer Valley, $1 million lots plus, acreage in mountain areas, ski in, ski out is very valuable. Is there a vision where there's some housing in this area that's for sale and becomes available to people who want to pay the big 7-figure amounts.
You know, I think that that's part of the discussion. You know, I think, you know, some of the properties that we have here, you know, might be an opportunity to do that. We can put lifts in you know, Mary Ellen Gulch, you know, so a lot of that can happen regardless of what happens here with additional Forest Service land.
And doesn't the Mountain Accord also give you property on the upper elevation of the Twin Peaks in Mary Ellen? So that,
correct.
So is there a plan then, in order to use that land in Mary Ellen, you would need an access from the upper elevations. Does it bring the gondola from Hidden to Twin Peak back into play if Mountain Accord goes through? Is that something that Snowbird would be pursuing?
Not to Twin Peaks, but it is possible to put something across the top from Hidden Peak over to you know, the far side, again, on our private property on the other side. And we don't need Forest Service land to do that either, to be honest with you. We can do that from Hidden Peak over to the far side of Mary Ellen Gulch on our private property.
So, as I've researched this, and maybe the County Commission can correct me, but my big worry, and the reason that I've stuck with this, is just because of that little orange piece of ground on the right. I think that's the game changer. If that piece of land is acquired through a land swap, then Snowbird has a contiguous piece of ground from the Utah County, the Salt Lake side, all the way down to one of our roads. And so my question is, what's the cost to taxpayers if we have to provide infrastructure? Historically, out on our website, there's grammar requests, and I've been drinking from a fire hose on this, and I don't want to be incorrect in anything that we've represented. Sometimes we may be a little bit on or off, but the understanding is the County Commission has always said, you guys just keep it on the Salt Lake side. We'll work with you. You're a private landowner. We respect that. That's fine. But as soon as there's contiguous ground, then I think as taxpayers, we need to understand what the costs are. I don't see any upside yet. It's just a cost that, as far as I'm concerned. So as we go forward in this process, those are the kind of questions we'd like to have people answering. I don't want to be answering them. I've accomplished everything I set out to do. I've accomplished everything I set out to do. Bring some transparency, hand the baton over to the guy that's in charge, and the mayors, and so that's my concern, is that little orange piece. And the one question I have is, why are we only thinking of one option, either the land trade or not? Why don't we work together and come up with a third alternative? What if we could figure out a way to get that land and retire it and prevent that contiguous ground? I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I've got 1,000 acres in Big Cottonwood, Little Cottonwood, and 600 acres up here. Could we maybe do some kind of a swap that would give Salt Lake more value than what they're asking for right now? I don't know. But those are the kind of ideas that I hope will come to the steering committee, whoever that ends up being. We're going to continue to actively field questions and get engagement. We're at 6,200 people now in 6 weeks. I'd like to see that grow to 10,000 or 20,000 so people can have a voice. But I want to turn the baton over to my elected officials to take the process really where it needs to go, because we've accomplished what we set out to do.
Don Watkins, Mayor of Alpine City. I'd like to first say I haven't taken a dime. And but I have to admit, no one's offered me a dime in any of my campaigns. So in full disclosure. Number two, I think with some words I've said to Mr. Bonar that I have a conflict that I won't be allowed on Snowbird, but I'm too old for that anyway. I want to just mention something about each and every one of you being here. First of all, it's July 4th coming up. Boston Tea Party, go people. This started by a strange call or email or something from an individual named Mark Allen. And he said, I know you've been fighting some issues on your hillsides, critical environmental zone. I'm a personal property right person. I own property. But I also believe in zoning. Zoning is community rights. It's a balance. I don't believe if I own a piece of property and the next door neighbor wants to put a gun range there, that's okay, just because he has personal property rights. Zoning rights are developed by the citizens of our cities. And I think they're fair, and I think they absolutely respect personal property rights. They're constitutional given. That's why our country was given. But zoning is also fair. It allows so there isn't some pornography place move in next door saying, well, that's my personal property rights. They have to be balanced. Now, I want to just say something about the public process. I don't count myself as a politician. I'm embarrassed sometimes to say I'm a mayor. Not in my town, because I am respected, but to be part of the establishment. But let me say this. It's your turn to pretty soon vote for elected officials. Some of them take this attitude. They elected me, so I'll make the decisions. Others believe in a public, open, transparent process. Now, Karen, over here, one citizen made a stink about what's going on here. Mark somehow gets a hold of it, and then gets a hold of me that thinks I'm a renegade, which I am, comes to my door, and we meet for 2 hours on the front step. And I go, ooh, this guy's got a beard, what have I joined here? Sure enough, as I start to disclose openly emails from other politicians, mayors, commissioners, different things, because I don't care. It's public information, and I'm going to get it out, because I'm not afraid of the citizens. I have faith and trust in the citizens. So we started letting information out. I happen to know that Bill Lee is a process person, democratic process. I said, Mark, go to Mr. Lee. He will listen, and he will believe in the process. I haven't found that with the previous commissioners. My city found about a 17,000 referendum to overvote their rezoning of critical lands above Alpine. We lost by 2,000 votes. But I was treated at the county level, as well as my citizens, with great embarrassment. You now have a chance to vet out public officials. Don't vote for just the most popular, the one you know. When you meet with them, you don't know how to vote on certain issues. Drill them on public process. Now, the last thing on conflict of interest. It's outrageous what happens sometimes. I deal with Walmart. Whether you like them or not, they're a well-run organization. I can't take their buyers out to lunch. Not because they're not good people, because they don't want the appearance or even a chance of a conflict of interest. Now, Bill doesn't know if someone gives him $1. But when one of our commissioners' #1 campaign donation comes from outside our community, and now we fill it's tied to Snowbird, that's too bad. Now I hope I think he does feel bad. And I think he's going to make it right, the commissioner. I hope so. I think so. But it's your job. Finally, let me just say, I thought there's going to be 20 people here tonight, and that's it. We're going to be in a little trouble. This is overwhelming. You do control your cities and your towns. Thank you for being here.
What a mess we created, huh? So I think in fairness to Mayor of Cedar Hills, if you'd come up, I think you had someone ask you a question about openness and transparency, and I'm actually the one that received the email, the grammar request that showed that you had gone to a black tie event with Bob Boner and Dick Bass, and we had an opportunity in which you could have disclosed that, and maybe you would take a moment and explain yourself.
Sure. Happy to be here. I've learned a lot and appreciate being here. And so I know I've got a lot of friends here tonight, but don't feel any obligation to shake my hand or wave or anything like that. So I was invited to go to, I think, 2 fundraisers with Snowbird, and I did. I think I probably spent more on the silent auction than the meal cost. But I was also invited to go to an event that the governor threw for Robert Redford, so I went to that as well. So I've never asked for a political contribution from Snowbird. I've never received one. but I did. But you know, I think that my involvement with the American Fork Canyon visioning process has been really good, and almost everything that Bill Lee said, I'm with him on that. So there's one thing that I'm probably in disagreement with him on, and it's the one thing that you're probably going to hate me on. And that's just because I do like the canyon the way it is, but I like what Snowbird has said about what they want to do. So that's probably the exact opposite of what you guys think, right? Exactly. Yeah. So my involvement with the visioning process has been, and there's about 12 of us or so that sit on this committee. And so if they were all here, they would say that I have played this completely straight. I've never advocated for Snowbird. I've never advocated for Save Our Canyons. And so to the extent that I've ever advocated for Snowbird is when I went up to the state legislature to ask for some funds for our committee. And I answered some questions from legislators where they asked about the gondola, and I said, yes, I have heard Snowbird talk about that. And then I said something like, that'd be a great ride, or that'd be great. So I wish I hadn't said that, but still, the fact that I've said that I like what they've told me so far has not changed, even though my personal opinion is that, it hasn't changed how I've conducted myself in terms of our committee, because I think I've been really straightforward on that. But, you know, ask me any questions that you want, and I'm happy to answer. Go ahead.
I heard you had interest in the mouth of American Fork Canyon. Is that correct? I mean, does that sway your decision or your preferences towards?
Say that again, one more time.
Do you have any land interest at the mouth of American Fork Canyon? And does that affect your preferences as to where this process goes?
If you're talking about the home that I live in, then yeah, I live in Cedar Hills. But it's not, and I guess Cedar Hills, because it's close to the mouth of the canyon, you could say that. But if Snowbird ever did anything, I've heard people say that it would increase property values. I've heard people say that it wouldn't. So I don't know. And so the answer to your question is that had zero impact on any thoughts that I've ever had, because I'm not sure it would have any impact on my house.
Mayor, I appreciate it coming up and like this. It's
sure.
Really appreciate it. I just had one question regarding the emails that were released and talked about. In those you referred, you asked your secretary to thank Bob Onar and some of the other people there at Snowbird for their help with the Snowbird project. I was wondering if you'd be able to elaborate on what the Snowbird project is.
Yeah, I think that when I first started getting involved with this 2 years ago or so, I think that's what we called it originally, because when I was appointed mayor, then the outgoing mayor came to me and said, you need to go talk with Snowbird. They have some ideas about the canyon. Take this council member with you, and she knows about it. So I did. So we went up and talked with Snowbird, and so I realized right away what they wanted to do. And I also recognized that some people were going to like it and some people were going to hate it. So I started talking with Sean Seeger, who was here earlier, and so he and I interact on Mountain Land Association of Government. And I started talking with the county commissioners, and so we started thinking that, you know, there's a lot of issues at play here. Some of those issues are how much the canyon's being used. Our population's supposed to perhaps double in the next 25 years. How do you handle that? So we thought it would be a good idea to create a steering committee. And so we told Snowbird that said, we understand you can go straight to the NEPA process, but we think it's a really good idea if we create a steering committee to study all of the issues in the canyon. And obviously part of that is public involvement. So I think your question was something along the lines that there's an email where I called something the Snowbird Project. I think that's what it was called originally, and then we quickly, and that was informally. That was before a steering committee was ever created. So when the steering committee was created, then we called it the American Fork Canyon Visioning Project.
Did you have any discussions with Snowbird during that process about their...
I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear up here.
Did you have any discussions with Snowbird during that process, or your conference calls with the commissioner about the 416 acres being part of this, of that project?
I'm really glad you asked that, because the answer is no, absolutely no. And so the entire time that I've been dealing with this, then I had heard that Mountain Accord was talking about a land swap. Never once did I ever hear that it involved American Fork Canyon. So it wasn't until Mark Allen pointed out that there was an issue that I think I and most people in Utah County knew that there was an issue with this. So I went up on this last week to the Mountain Accord meeting, and I had told the director before that I thought it was a mistake not to involve anyone from Utah County. And so I told their board, but I think I've been telling their director for maybe close to a year that people from Utah County should be on the Mountain Accord board. So I reiterated that again and said, you need to have people on the board. Sorry. And also people on the executive committee of Mountain Accord as well. So I was surprised, just like you were on that.
I'm not sure if you had any conversations, but were you surprised that they made that proposal to Mountain Accord as opposed to the American Fork Vision process, which they were already integral in?
If your answer is, well, I was surprised that it went to Mountain Accord, the answer is no. And I'll tell you why, which is that Mountain Accord is probably a year and a half away from where American Fork Canyon Vision is. So, I mean, we're really in its infancy. And so our job was really to study the issues, get public involvement, and try and answer some of the questions that we're done dealing with. So we're not a body that would be prepared to talk about that. But also, let's be clear, which is that American Fork Canyon Vision doesn't have the ability to make a deal for Snowbird and the Forest Service. And neither does Mountain Accord. They have the ability to make a recommendation, but none of our bodies have the ability to make a deal for them.
Just a little clarification on the Forest Service is taking their blueprint as the proposed action to the meeting.
You mean Mountain Accords? Okay. Well, I don't know about that, but I'll just take your word on that. Okay. You're right. So, well, I think if he's asking about why wasn't there any information on the American Fork Vision pamphlets, because we didn't know about it. And so the time at which we did, I don't know if they had all of their pamphlets and everything made up. So I don't know if I can answer that correctly, because Sean Seeger and probably Buck Swaney have been heavily involved with the pamphlets and brochures and all of that.
So one of the things that's been confusing to us is Buck Swaney was the architect of the Mountain Accord, and he's been working on that for like a year and a half or 2 years. So then he came over with the Snowbird when the money was given. My understanding is he came over and he's been hired to be the architect on this side. So he knows what the end button is to hit. And the dialogue and all the things that we went to, whenever I bring up that land stuff, they'd just deflect off topic. And you say, why? So I'd post something on my Facebook page, next thing you know, you'd get a map. We still don't have an accurate map of who all those private landowners are up there. So it's been frustrating for us. Buck is no longer with Logan Simpson Design, we understand. We think that's probably a healthy thing as we move a process forward. And so we're going to continue to be watchdogs, not because we want to be, but because we think that this potentially up there, if he could develop that, and he's got 3,000 acres and got zoned to C2, you could have up to 150 homes up there. of who knows how much, and the impact could be significant. So that's why we're here. We are the 99%. This is for the 1%. And we'd just like to, maintain our rights as well, and would like you to help champion that. But I would like to ask, as it's been mentioned, that you recuse yourself from the process going forward and let your city manager, because you did not disclose in front of when we asked, and we want to make it look clean. Our group raised $3,600 to help make Larry Ellertson's issues look clean as well. So we want to be part of the win, part of the happy, part of the successes. But I really want to turn the time over to, the commission and the mayors and so forth. What was the question?
Yeah, I think I've done a really good job on the committee, but it's bigger than me. And so, again, if you were to ask anyone on the committee whether I have been fair or not, or whether I played it straight, they would tell you that I had. And so, but at the same time, because we decided to give the money back to Snowbird, Tim, that we're out of funds. And so, so we're going on hiatus. We've already spent the money in terms of paying for the professor who's doing surveys up American Fork Canyon. But our plan is to go back up to the legislature and ask for funds to continue to study the, that's fine. And so, but I think that you're equating American Fork Canyon vision with trying to make a deal with Snowbird, but it's not. And so, all of our meetings have dealt with the process. The process of trying to figure out what we want the canyon to look like in 25 years. And so that's really what it's about. I think it's that I and our committee has been compared to Mountain Accord, which deserves some criticism. But you've got people on our committee that represent UTA and UDOT and the Park Service and the Forest Service, and Sundance was late in coming to the party. We thought that they knew they were invited, but they were late in coming to the party, and so we feel bad about that. But Save Our Canyons is there, Snowbird is there, and then there's some elected officials. So we feel like it's been a really good group of people that are involved there. But the process is bigger than me, and so yeah, and so even though I think if Carl Fisher is here from Save Our Canyons, and so he said in emails and in a lot of other places that American Fork Canyon visioning is not the problem, it's the solution. And I think that's probably the case, is that it's a good vehicle to study things out. And I also think that he's been very nice and complimentary about how I've handled myself. But in answer to your question, Tim, is that if people felt like I was conflicted, despite the good job that I think I've done, and probably you should look at the body of work that I've done there, because talk's cheap, right? And so I think I've done good work there, so I can say that. But come to our next meeting. Anyone can come to them. Ask any of the members of the committee whether I've been straight, whether everyone on the committee's been straight or not. And I think that they will probably answer that. Go ahead. That's okay. Right.
The property rights are the property rights. And much as I'm really frustrated that there is private property rights at that canyon, it's a fact. And we're going to have to deal with it. We've already got ski lifts there. It's unfortunate. I don't like that idea. I like the idea that ski resorts are open. When you're looking at it from a, I want to use the wilderness land. But there's not much we can do about it. So if we want to ask you to review this whole thing, we want to do it. But at this point in time, I think it needs to be out there. We don't have enough information to say, please get off the body. I don't think anybody knows for sure whether he's supported this or not. You don't have the information.
So, you know, I appreciate that. And so, very much, let me add a couple of things. And so you're absolutely right in that this process is bigger than I or any other individual. And so what I've been telling the committee for the last probably year and a half, whenever they would ask, you know, what everyone thought, and I've said consistently, my marching orders come from the residents of Cedar Hills and for Utah County at large. So despite whatever my personal feelings are, then that doesn't get away in terms of what my residents want to do and so what I'm going to do. So our city, I think, wants to make a resolution. I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. Thank you. I will add just a couple of things, which is I sent out an email to Commissioner Lee and the other commissioners today who are creating a resolution, but I also sent out an email to all of the mayors saying, I know you're thinking about making resolutions. I said, don't forget the property rights issue. Don't forget the First Amendment rights issue. Because just like you said, it's really important. Yes, ma'am. But I'm probably not going to be able to hear you unless you come up, so maybe.
You bet. Great question. And thank you. One of the things that I understand about Cedar Hills that's unique is that the city manager does most of the managerial kind of stuff. And so maybe Cedar Hills is a unique animal. Maybe you need to take us back to their Cedar Hills Commission and figure things out, because that's beyond my scope. But yeah, good response. Your question.
Yes, I want to ask a question to our Commissioner Lee that I had from before. I've been sitting on it for a while. You mentioned zoning, and we've heard CE1 and CE2 zoning up there, but I'm hearing from...
I only know of CE1.
Okay, I know of CE1 as well. That allows lots of different uses. It allows foster homes, it allows ski areas, it allows marinas. There's lots of things listed as permitted and conditional uses in that zone, but I'm hearing from a lot of people here and from people that I've talked to that they think of the American Fort Canada as a wilderness area. I'm wondering if...
CE stands for critical environment.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay. I'm wondering if the commission might consider a zoning change as a way of protecting that area and creating a new zone that is a wilderness zone that does not allow many of these kinds of development up in that area.
That's a possibility. Usually wilderness is designated on a federal basis, but there is a possibility of that. I don't know how long, I mean, if everyone needs to stay. I'll stay as long as you want if you want to keep talking or talking after. I just don't want, I want to be cognizant of time too, so.
I'll ask a question then while they work out that mic. Okay, great. Jeff Jensen from Warren. This is kind of a general question, but the reason I think is as I think about why this issue has generated such an impassioned response, other than simple love for the canyon, is I think there's a general feeling that Mountain Accord, while on the surface a reasonable group of individuals seeming to come together to work out solutions, it feels like they've taken their problem and tried to solve their problem by making it at least partly our problem without letting us get involved. And our response to that can be anything from calm and reasoned cooperation to heated confrontation and possibly, heaven forbid, litigation. And I think a lot of us are trying to decide where to come down on that, and part of it may have to do with what your perceived attitude is of this other group. My question is, from what you and any of the rest of you that have been personally involved with this so far, is your feeling that we were left out of this process due to an inadvertent omission, or was this more on the lines of an intentional deception? And that may be different for different parties in that group. How can you answer that?
Yeah, I don't know. I generally would like to take people's character and word at face value and instead of going straight to that they're trying to deceive me or do something. I'm generally kind of let's take people at their word first. What's that word? Trust but verify, I think is what we hear over and over. Nevertheless, I feel the same way you do on this, in that the blindsided part of this and not having the opportunity to go through our process and coming over the fence, as you will, onto our side here is offensive. And I think that to me, I pushed back as hard as I knew how as an elected official to get some sort of response on that. And again, realize that I am one in this process. I am one county commissioner. The other county commissioners are going to have to speak for themselves on this. I am not looking forward to a certain extent, and I think both the other commissioners know that I'm not one to sit back and not just speak out. I was not elected to do so, to just stand there and say, okay, let's follow. I mean, you always hope when you get into office that you get 6 or 7 months of just kind of coming in and seeing what's going on. That did not happen for me. I came right into the fire right at the very beginning, and I had to tackle the tough questions right off. And it hasn't slowed up. And I'm not looking for tough questions, but I will not back down from trying to find a solution that I think that we can generally kind of agree to. I don't know what the solution is, but we need to go forward with it and maybe start from coming and finding grounds that we can all agree upon. And I think one of them that I think we've found is that I think all of the commissioners, and I hate to speak for them, but in my conversations with them, I think all of the commissioners at this point are in agreement that Mountain Accord overstepped.
Why don't we get all three of you together in the same place?
Well, we can't because of law. As soon as you have 2 county commissioners in the same area, we have to publicly notice it because it becomes a quorum. And so that's part of the reason why we can't do that unless we publicly notice it and everything else. And so that's part of the reason that we can't do that.
So are these people we can work with, or are they trying to pull a fast one on us? Because it seems like now that this is out, they have the nerve to act surprised that we're not happy.
Yeah, I guess that will be determined by
so we still don't know yet.
Trust and verify. We're trusting their word at this point that they're not going to do anything on that side, and we're going to hold their feet to the fire on that until we go through this process here and come to a decision that works for Utah County.
Understood.
And then we'll see. And if it goes from there in a different way from what their voice to us was, then we're going to have to go forward in a different manner if it's different than what they said.
Great, and thanks for stepping to the plate on this.
Can I just add a little bit on that one, if you don't mind? You asked what the rest of us thought on that too, if we thought it was...
Sure.
I can't remember how you put it, but...
It seems like there's a possible spectrum of, whoops, my bad, or you caught me.
Lie to me once, bad on you. Lie to me twice, bad on me. Is that how it goes?
Kind of.
Something like that.
I don't want to think ill of people, but
Basically, in the 80s, when I went to my first public meeting, I was told by the Basses they wouldn't restrict any access. They would just have a few locked buildings for their supplies on the lifts that were going into Mineral Basin. A couple years later, we went up. There were ropes, there were gates, there were signs saying no trespassing. Lied to me once, bad on you. Lied to me twice, bad on me. That's why I raised a red flag. I didn't feel comfortable about it. That's why I had suspect. So that's why you guys need to stay involved.
Commissioner, my name is Trent Augustus. I'm a current city council member for Cedar Hills. I just wanted to say thanks to you and Mr. Allen for coming out here. I know you guys have spent countless hours away from your families, and I know that you don't have to do this, and you're doing it out of your desire to help our community. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. I did want to clarify a comment and then also ask a question, if I may. I believe it was your question about what interest economically does Cedar Hills have at the mouth of the canyon. To clarify that a little further, a couple of years ago, Cedar Hills actually went in and redesigned our golf course and actually moved an entire hole and tee box to create room for new housing. I believe there's like 15 lots up there that we created. Currently it is zoned as a residential lot, but we did that so that we could actually pay off part of the golf course bond at a future point. This was right before 2008, right before the market crash. So the market crashed, we weren't able to sell the property, so it's kind of been sitting there. But there have been discussions in Cedar Hills with myself and other council members as to what to do with that property. And the discussion has come up as to whether that property could be converted over to a commercial zone, and if that would somehow benefit those that are in the canyon, whether it's shops, retail, some type of commercial development. So there have been discussions in that, so it does need to be put out to the public that yes, that conversation has taken place, and that Cedar Hills does have a benefit if that land was developed for a commercial use. So that is a feasible question, yes. So my question for our commissioner, going back to the resolutions, I know it's been talked about a couple of times, and I'm actually currently drafting a resolution for Cedar Hills that I'll be presenting on Tuesday to our council. It's actually modeled after Councilmember Frost's resolution that they presented. And I actually talked to him, I've got the verbiage and the wording for it, and I'll be using it as my template also. So going forward, I know you said that the commission is also looking at drafting their own resolution. How do you see these resolutions going forward? What do you think their impact will be? How can the cities benefit them? Is there certain language that we should have in them? What teeth do they have? Are they just kind of a nice, happy, hey, we're going to make everybody feel good because we've now passed a resolution? Or what is your take on these resolutions, and what happens with cities passing resolutions?
Yeah, it's probably right on everything you said to a certain extent. Resolutions usually show intent. And what a resolution does on a county level is once we have some consensus from all three commissioners, and we say, yes, through this resolution, we agree to, you heard the resolution where it says the whereases, those are usually just stating. They're stating what is looked at as fact, what has happened, and therefore, the therefores are the most important part of any resolution. Therefore, what are we going to do? And I think that's the important part of any resolution. What are we going to do afterwards? Because as soon as the commission, I'll speak for the commission on this, as soon as the commission votes on that and it passes, and I'm hoping that we can get a unanimous pass on this resolution, then it helps to direct the rest of the county, the attorneys, and everything else in a direction in which we can go. We can use the resources that we have and say, because of this, and therefore we're going to do this, we can direct a path and say, now, as our county attorneys, the county attorneys, we have passed this resolution, so you help to defend what we've passed. So that's not just a happy, good, feel-good thing, but it is actually teeth in which we can move forward. But it also shows, I think, as the cities come forward, there's a certain amount of solidity. There it is. Must be getting late. That it shows, that we're concerned about it. I talk with mayors on the side, and a bunch of them have come up to me and said, hey, what's going on up there? I hear all these rumblings and everything. But as you come down through it, and the city councils are the legislative body in your cities, and as you find that solidarity, it just helps. It shows that we're all on the same page, that we're trying to go in the same direction and pull in the same direction.
Okay, and that's kind of what I was wondering, if there was any teeth that the cities had by passing those, or if that just showed support to the county level. And so, yeah, thank you. I would challenge anybody that is interested, if you want to come out on Tuesday night, you'll be able to see what Cedar Hills is going to be passing also, hopefully.
And you know, I can't make our resolution public until Friday when it's published. And then we won't vote on it until Tuesday, but I intend to put it out so that you can see it. So if you want to come talk about it. Now, of course, it's in draft form until it's actually passed, because it can be changed at the commission level. Yes, sir.
I appreciate what I've been hearing tonight. And you people, a lot of you are a lot further ahead of me as far as politics and that type of thing. My name is John Van Wagoner. I've lived in American Fork all my life. And about I can't remember, 4 or 5 years ago, I heard about a meeting in Prohl Chambers with Snowbird, wanting to come into American Fork Canyon. And I went to that meeting, and I was the only one there that said no and voted against Snowbird coming into American Fork Canyon. And after that meeting, this representative from Snowbird grabbed me, and he says, I want you to come up to Snowbird, and I'll show you what we're going to do. And he gave me a ski pass. Now, what do you think of that? And I took my wife, and I went up. And he once again repeated everything I had heard. But that didn't change me at all. A little more background. My father and his partner, Lloyd Strong, mined the Dutchman mine for years on the south side of Miller Hill. And then they decided after a while to go up Mary Ellen Gulch to the Yankee mine. And they mined that for several years, 2 ridges over from Alda. Now, what I'm suggesting is, when I went to that meeting, it seemed to me that the decisions were all made, there was no recourse at all. So they came over the mountain, and they're skiing in that area. And the thoughts of condominiums on Miller Hill gives me chills. And what about the roads? Are they going to try to do something to go up American Fork Canyon on this side? They'll never get around a couple of places in that road without a lot of money. Blasting off big boulders and turning Z Dugway into a passable place. So what's going to happen? I didn't hear anything about the animal rights when we started this meeting. We talked about riding horses and bikes and all that type of thing. I'd like to maybe ask, how many have ever hunted deer on Miller Hill? Yeah, I shot my first one from up there. And there's a lot of other things on that mountain that's never been discussed. And I'm not into the politics of it all, but basically, I don't trust that ski company. It's all about their money and making more money.
Thank you for being a part of the process. Continue to stay in. Were you disclosing that ski pass thing? I was just wondering. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Rob Crowley. I'm the Cedar Hills Council member right now also. And I'm excited that we're going to, Attorney Justice has gone forward with this plan, and I guarantee I'll support it, and I think we'll get maybe even unanimous. We may even get unanimous support. I'd like to see Alpine, Highland, Lehigh, I hope they all join in on doing this. First of all, one thing that I am unsure of right now is Mayor Gigi mentioned that some of the things that he's gotten as far as benefits. I know that he got a helicopter ride up in a nice view of what was being planned there early on, maybe 2 years ago in a dinner, and he didn't mention that, so I thought I'd mention that because I know about it. But the thing is, because there's been lack of disclosure, I don't know if there's going to be more that comes forward as we learn more and more. And so I just thought I'd bring that up, that even on the city council, I don't know a lot of the details that have happened. Second of all, can't the commissioners stop this? Early on in the discussion, you mentioned that if it gets to the point that it needs to go to the next level, that it has to go to the local authorities, and you mentioned it's the commissioners, the 3 commissioners. So if the 3 commissioners are united and say, we don't want this in American Fork Canyon, can the process of getting that 416 acres be stopped at that point?
If we go through the process and that becomes the conclusion, that turns out to be the conclusion of it, they have already said, Mountain Accord has said on their side that they will honor the wishes of Utah County.
Okay, that's where the answer lies.
I don't know if that will be the process. I'm just saying that's what they said. Now,
but
Snowbird, yeah.
Okay, but I will tell you at this point, I wish we could get all you commissioners in the same place, but you know, I've talked to you on the phone. I've grown to trust you by our individual conversations I've had with you. It would have been really nice to have you leave, be here for an hour, have the next one come for an hour, have him leave, so we could get you all at one night. Maybe
I know one place will be Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock in our council chamber.
But it'd be nice if, with all this representation, if we could get all three together, not at the same time. But anyway, the last comment I want to make is Commissioner Ellertson came to a city council meeting for Cedar Hills several months back. We had concerns about Canyon Road, and he showed me in that meeting that he doesn't really care about Cedar Hills, doesn't care about Canyon Road. His big projects seem to be more important than anything that mattered to us. So at this point, I have trust in you. He's going to have to earn my trust in this case, and it's Commissioner Graves, right? The third one?
Yes, the third one, yes.
I don't know much about him yet, but I've heard through the grapevine that he follows Commissioner Ellertson a lot. I hope he will stand up, and I hope he will do what's best for our county in all cases, not just in this case, but in all cases. The $150 million BRT project, not impressed that Ellertson was pushing for that. I think that if all of Utah County knew about that, then we'd have a big uprising about that too. Maybe that's next. But I think that Ellertson has to earn my trust, and so does Graves. You've earned my trust, and I think that that's where the answer lies. We've got to get them convinced that it's the right thing, and I hope that they will come to meetings like this.
All right, thank you.
Could you pull the map up again that you had before? I have several questions about that.
So we're gonna wrap this up. Bill has said he will stay right here and he'll answer these questions one-on-one if you'd like.
Could we just do one more, or is it too late?
Map?
Could we do one more about the map?
Sure.
They need to pull it up.
Hey, Brad, I got a question. Anybody that loves Americorps Canyon, why would you want it?
It's a good question. I think that's why we're all here.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. And you know what? I think this too. I'm going to say something that I'm happy to say something that maybe Bill couldn't or Commissioner Lee could not. And I think that we're seeing that we have one commissioner here. We need to get two more on board. And we have a great deal of influence with this group and everybody in this room. I would suggest that you use any influence that you can in a very nice political way, if needs be, and yield your influence to the other two commissioners. That's the political process, right? And we'll be able to see that unfold. Let's talk about the map.
So it was the last map that went off. Yeah, that map. Can you slide it down a little bit so you can see Little Cottonwood Canyon too? Yeah. I mean, up. So I ski at Snowbird. It's a huge place. If you slide it up just a little bit more to just the blue area, you know, that Snowbird is proposing to give. Yeah, right there. So, you know, that side of the canyon is south-facing. It's extremely steep. It seems highly unlikely that they would ever do anything with that land, that 1,107 acres. It seems like they're not giving up very much by exchanging that land. You also look at Snowbird's boundary, their ski resort boundary, and they own very little private land in that, but yet they have a huge ski area there that's, you know, maybe 3 times what their private land is. You look into Mineral Basin and you see that, you know, they have some private land there, but those key 416 acres open up, you know, probably triple the size of their current footprint that they have. And in the Mountain Accord document, it says, you know, what Snowbird gives up and what Snowbird receives. It says they give up 1,107 acres. They receive 416 acres plus special interest and local government support to expand the ski boundary. And my question is to the commissioner, who are those special interest groups and who is the government support that said they would be able to expand the ski boundary if they, you know, exchange that land? And I have a couple other questions too.
I don't know. I don't know where you're at.
I'm right here,
Oh,
sorry.
right there, okay. I don't know. This again is just, for me, is trying to find the correct information to know what's going on. So I just don't know.
But, you know, it seems like those 416 acres are extremely valuable. You know, if they can triple the size of their resort, once they get that and get permission to expand their ski boundary, it could be one of the largest ski areas in the United States. They also throw out a red herring in saying that they agree not to put condominiums or buildings on those 416 acres, which is silly because it's at 10,000 feet and on mountain peaks and right in the middle of their ski areas. But then they say later, but we agree to get permission to build other buildings further down American Fork Canyon. You know, so that is their intent, to triple the size of their ski area, build homes and condominiums and stuff down there, but they're trying to act like, you know, it's not their intent.
Right. You know, I ran businesses for years, and so I understand what it means to get a return on investment. And so when you look at this whole thing, and they're a business, they are a business, and so you have to kind of look through their eyes on what their return on their investment is. When they're giving up land and getting something else, obviously as a business, you're going to look for a certain return on investment. If you're not, you go out of business pretty quick. So that has to be looked at as well, I'm sure.
All of that land they bought, I think, is speculation, not worth very much, unless they get those 416 acres. If they get that, it's a gold mine. If they get permission to expand the ski boundary, and it would destroy our canyon. Thank you.
You're a very smart man. This is safer for me to answer, I think, the comment on, than the commissioner, because I see it the same way you do. So we've got Ian Cummings, who's a new owner of Snowbird. He sold Park City Resort. He's got a lot of money. So now he's got Bob Bonner as the CEO, general manager. And Bob's been telling us that he has no firm plans. So I can't imagine what kind of new CEO would say. You could go into your CEO and say, hey, Bob. Bob goes into Ian and says, hey, Ian, I got an idea. You got 1,400 acres. Why don't we trade it for 416? Let's take a net loss of 1,000 acres. And then, if they don't go for that, let's say, well, we'll swap it for 100 acres down by Tibble Fork. Without a plan, right? That's what frustrates me is, you know, if they're to come and say, here's our plan, let's work through the process, here's our end game, here's our intent. Scott Woodward at the Fox Hollow meeting said, what's the intent? And he wouldn't answer what's the intent. That's why we're still involved. What's the intent? Because I think that that is the trigger piece of land. So do we work to put in a 100-foot wide easement through there? Or do we work to get it ourselves? Or do we do some kind of land swap so the Forest Service has now to pick between what we present as the public versus Snowbird? I think we need to rally, keep growing our forces, and have those kind of conversations. Because I don't think, in my view, it's not game over. And I don't want to go up there someday and have the view shed ruined. I would like to go up there and say, hey, we the people bought the property and we prevented that contiguous piece of ground. So I think we could do something like that. But we need to grow and double our size. We're already bigger than Save Our Canyons, our organization. We're almost bigger than Save Our Canyons and Wasatch Backcountry combined. And we've done it in 6 weeks. So where do we go from here? So I've had somebody ask about volunteer opportunities. We've got a couple things going on right now which are really fun. This little, have you seen some of these things floating around? The pictures people are posting on social media say, my family will protect American Fork Canyon, or I will protect American Fork Canyon. I've been posting these on Mayor Ben McAdams' page. Dirty trick, right? We've got a bounty on Mayor Deege. Whoever gets him standing with one of these pictures gets a poster from Willie Holtman. So before he leaves tonight, go for it. Bill doesn't get very many points because he's been 100% supportive. In this process, I have come in 6 weeks to trust implicitly a couple men in this room. And as we close, it would be improper for me to not recognize who has stood up when there was time to stand up. The first man that showed courage in this process was Brad here. He went in front of the county commission and just said, we have to protect our properties. We will stand behind you, but we want you to stand in front of us. And I think that's coalescing that way. I hope that's the case. The other man that I saw that was courageous that day was the junior commissioner, Billy. We had a lot of people that wanted to come and comment, and there was other business on the table, 23 items or something like that. And he allowed us voice. The senior commissioner tried to kind of squash that a few times. I don't think he understood how we would rebel if he did that. But we're going to rally around him too. We raised $3,600 to help send his money back to Snowbird and say thank you very much, but you can't buy our politicians. It wasn't meant that way. But we want to make it look squeaky clean as we go through our process, right? So I salute those men. After that, Don Watkins. These are men with no agenda other than due process, open, and transparency. I wish I could say that about Mayor Deege. And I hope that we'll grow to that place. But right now, my trust is in these three. And I will throw every energy that I have to support them as they lead. I would walk to the battle with these three men. And I hope you'll join with me as we move forward in doing that. As we just close, thank you very much for what we've done. We have done something really amazing. Started with Karen. And a member of the press, wasn't this woman here, but we really appreciate the press that have helped us get the story out. Social media tools, we haven't even touched Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest. We've done most of this growth through Facebook. What a powerful way to get connected. So now we've got some special interest groups, right? We've got motorized.